This is a video response to Michael Moore's request for personal accounts regarding the practices of our health insurance industry. My name is Jacqueline. I'm 54 years old. I have a long history of experience with the practices of health insurance companies. It's a history which has ultimately left me where I am today, homeless, living on the good graces of family members, and hovering just over poverty level on disability insurance. I began suffering the painful and debilitating effects of my autoimmune diseases over 20 years ago, though they were never properly diagnosed. My health insurance would repeatedly deny my doctor the diagnostic tests that may well have discovered the source of my illnesses. I have suffered from Hashimoto's disease, Sjogren's disease, IBS, interstitial cystitis, fibromyalgia, kidney disease, gallbladder disease, chronic cystic mastitis, cluster headaches, and most recently it is suspected multiple sclerosis. Before I summarize my experiences with the health insurance industry, I'd like to note some brief facts about autoimmune diseases because they are grossly misunderstood, and those who suffer are tragically affected by that ignorance. We need to become aware because the prevalence of autoimmune disease continues to increase at alarming proportions. Back in 1998, in response to congressional interest, the National Institute of Health established the Autoimmune Disease Committee. That committee defined more than 80 autoimmune diseases to date. Many of them, such as MS, rheumatoid arthritis, and lupus, can be debilitating, life-threatening, and ultimately deadly. A full 5 to 8% of the U.S. population are affected, and that's a statistic based on those fortunate enough to have health insurance and then have it properly diagnosed. A disproportionate number of people suffering autoimmune disease are women, a segment of society whom I feel, and the statistics would bear, continues to receive an adequate and serious consideration within the medical and research communities. And now I'll attempt to offer the cliff notes on my 20-year-long health insurance nightmare. I can trace the nightmare back to 1988. It was a bad year, bringing me to the hospital on numerous occasions for surgeries and emergency room treatments. My husband was told by his employer that the health insurance company would be raising everybody's premium due to my frequent use of healthcare facilities. His company switched to a less expensive HMO that required larger co-payments. From that point forward, we began to grow accustomed to treatment and payment denials. During this time, my autoimmune symptoms grew worse. I was routinely treated with a plethora of medications in favor of costly diagnostic procedures. It kept the pharmaceutical industry happy, but the diagnostic tests that were denied may well have prevented many years of suffering and the proliferation of my disease. At one point, my doctor explained to me that the insurance company penalized him each time he would send me to a specialist. So my health continued to deteriorate along with the generic one-size-fits-all medical care that the insurance companies find most profitable. Then in 1999, my husband lost his job. We picked up Cobra for a while, but the monthly premium was astronomical and cost prohibitive. Just when we were about to join the ranks of the uninsured, my husband became self-employed and picked up his own small business health insurance. That premium cost us a full 35% of his gross income. While we tried to maintain the premium payments, our home began to fall apart, and we took out loans secured by our home just to pay the insurance premiums. And even while paying so much for health insurance, I spent much time fighting denied payments and unimproved diagnostics. I recall one 6-month-long battle with AmeriHealth, where because I had entered an approved hospital in the ER, but the ER doctors did not participate, I was expected to pay the ER doctor's portion of the bill. I guess I should have regained consciousness just long enough to make sure that the doctors were in sync with the hospital. In 2003, the strain of my illness and financial matters proved too much for my husband. He left our 30-year marriage suddenly, and just as suddenly, I was left without health insurance. I called several health insurance companies, but they all informed me that they could not accept me due to my health history. I was left without health insurance, income, and I was becoming sicker. I applied for disability, which is a long and humiliating process that required an attorney after the first denial. Once I was divorced, and while waiting through the disability appeals process, I became very ill and was taken to the ER at a time when I had no health insurance. The bills were overwhelming, charging me much more than what they would have received from my health insurance company if I'd had health insurance, and I ultimately paid them by selling my home. By this time, the Hashimoto's, which had gone undiagnosed for so many years, had completely destroyed my thyroid. It had grown so large that it prevented me from lying flat, often choking me and seriously obstructing my breathing. I needed to have the thyroid surgically removed. Medicare and the hospital required a $1,000 down payment, which further necessitated the sale of my home. The surgeon told me it was the second largest thyroid gland he'd ever removed. As a result, the surgery and recovery was more complicated, and this further exacerbated my fibromyalgia. I have learned to live with pain and debilitating illness for more than half my life. I don't ask for pity. I don't ask for charity. I just ask for a little humanity and justice. I endeavor to make the most of what I do have. I've struggled for over 30 years through illness to raise my children, work, pay taxes, be a good wife and law-abiding citizen. I'd love to be able to place some photos of fond memories from those 30 years in this spot, but as I mentioned, all of my possessions are in storage while I remain homeless. In their place, I'll show you some interesting things I've found on the internet while I finish telling you my story and how the health insurance industry's policy bring misery to so many when they deny just one. How does profitability sleep at night while our family sleeps without our dear Heather Lynn? We lost her just 2 years ago. My niece died suddenly at the age of 27, just as suddenly as she'd lost her health insurance, a loss that prevented her from continuing with the health care she required while undergoing a diet regimen offered by an unregulated diet industry. Until she'd lost her health insurance, she was able to receive the proper care and medications for her metabolic disease. Thinking of Heather now, grieving her loss, I cannot read this website from alanbaumgarten.com without becoming very ill and enraged. Or this one, a unique niche of purchased medical debt, ripe with potential? All I can do is worry about the potential of losing my own daughter. I will never forget the rage I felt watching her suffer in pain in the ER, hearing the words "found a growth," and then listening to the doctor as he told her that she needed additional and expensive tests, and that, because she was uninsured, she'd better get right on the phone to find assistance. All I could think of was the time that this would require, time that something could be growing inside her, growing to take her from me, and I would be damned if health insurance would ultimately take my daughter as it took my sister's. Meanwhile, there are living, breathing human beings salivating over the potential for profit in my daughter's uninsured treatment. Somehow, this picture seems much more appropriate to the cover for such a magazine in business. Medical debt buyers. Thank you, Mr. Moore, for this opportunity and for your efforts. Too many suffer in numbers that lie beyond the statistics. Americans who suffer and will remain denied because we don't make our country look like a very nice place to live, because we destroy the image and cut into profit. Americans seem to get nervous about placing limits on capitalism, but we're able to draw the line in certain areas. We won't allow the sale of babies or body parts. Why then does it suddenly become un-American to protest capitalism as it pertains to the profit of life and death? I will continue to fight in consideration of the many who suffer as I have, for my family and for the memory of my sweet niece Heather. No one should ever come to know this feeling, the feeling that your life has been pushed over into the expense column so that profit determines the value of your worth.